When I was having a bad day, I wanted to go to the gym. And that's where I decompressed. And now that space that brought me so much peace my whole life was now bringing me this anxiety or pressure or sadness.
Hello and welcome to About Time, the show where we have long overdue conversations about the journeys of women in sports. My name is Marke Freeman, athlete, author, fan of sports, and also an even bigger fan of the women who are changing them. In today's episode, we dive deep into the crucial topic of mental health and girls and women in sports. My guest and I explore the power of mental fitness and unlocking the true potential of female athletes and fostering a culture of empowerment on and off the court. This interview is brought to you by WeCOACH. Prior to Title IX, over 90% of women collegiate sports teams were coached by women. Today, over 50 years later, that number has decreased to 41%. That's why WeCOACH launched Move the Numbers to help change the landscape for women coaches and the student athletes they lead. WeCOACH is a one-of-a-kind nonprofit membership organization dedicated to recruiting, advancing, and retaining women coaches in all sports and levels through year-round professional growth and leadership development programs. WeCOACH fosters a diverse and inclusive community of over 10,000 coaching leaders who inspire young women to follow in their footsteps. If she can see her, she can be her. Together, we move the numbers to support and increase women in coaching. We teach, we inspire, we motivate, we lead, we coach. Visit our website at wecoachsports.org. That's wecoachsports.org. I am so excited to be joined by our next guest, who is currently playing professional basketball over in Scotland while working on her PhD in sports, physical education, and health sciences. Not just that, she's the brains behind the 5-Star Academy, where she hones the mental game for women athletes. She's got passion for all things women's sports and mental health. Please welcome Laken James.
Hi, I'm Laken James, and it's about time we talk about mental health in women's and girls' sports.
We're going to go ahead and start where it all began. You were born in Oconto, Wisconsin, population of just 4,500. I've heard you mention that in small communities like yours, players play multiple sports. What made you stick with basketball?
I think, I just kind of loved it from an early age. I was blessed to have my parents coach at the younger level. So I think it kind of built like a different kind of love for the game. So it was cool to have my mom and my dad, as my 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and so on coach. And it kind of created just that fun atmosphere around the experience of playing basketball. And then the game just continued to grow for me, and I just loved it.
A coach's kid. Now we can have a whole nother conversation about that. Did you always know that you wanted to play at the highest level, or was that something you just discovered along your journey?
I did actually. I don't think I always knew what that meant. When I was growing up, I was like, I would love to play college basketball, and hardly even knew the difference in divisions. So I was like, I want to play college basketball. And then I grew up 30 minutes away from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. So that quickly became my dream school. They're extremely successful. We would go to the games as kids. And for me then, I was like, nope, I changed my dream. I don't want to play college basketball. I want to play at Green Bay. So it kind of formulated with time.
I'm excited to discuss mental health. That's become a hot topic nowadays, especially at the highest level, and now the effects that it's having at the youth level. Why is this something that we should be educated on and something that we should prioritize in our space?
Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of times in our sports world, we get so infatuated with like speed and strength, and we get, the skill. You need this and you need that, and you're talking nutrition and all of those things. And as an athlete, of course, those are important. Like, I understand that, I know that. But for me, the biggest jumps in my career have come from when I've dialed in on my mental health and my mental training. And I just really realized that that's so valuable, and yet we don't have any, specific programs for kids to be going through, or, all that training that they do could be so much more amplified if we had that kind of coincided with that mental health space.
And I mean, you see it nowadays, especially at the professional level where they have the funds where they are just
Right.
throwing hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars into their mentality, their approach, their mental space.
Right.
I imagine being such a high achiever coming from a small community with huge expectations of yourself that you had to deal with a lot of silent pressures. What were some of the mental challenges you faced as a young girl with such big dreams, right? One of the first individuals in your community to get a full scholarship. Being on the campus at the University of Green Bay, where the enrollment is twice the size of the community that you grew up in. And then you go on and you play all over the world and you're a foreigner, you're new, you're a rookie, such a high achiever, even now working on your PhD. What are some things that affected your mental space and how do you handle it?
Myself personally, I guess I got caught really always chasing that dream, which is beautiful. I think we need that. But at the same time, kind of like you said, when you have those high dreams, those big dreams, it comes with a lot of pressure. It comes with a lot of, at times self-doubt. If you're not taking the strides you had envisioned, or, if the journey isn't going as smoothly as you might have hoped. And for me, that was definitely something I really realized at Green Bay. Like I mentioned, I dreamed about playing at Green Bay my whole life, my whole childhood. And then I got there and I never had felt more pressure because the hard part was getting there in my mind. But then I didn't realize the pressure that would come with, now I have to perform. Now I'm living my dream. What if I let this slip? Or what if this doesn't amount to what I had hoped and dreamed? And that was a huge thing for me. Once I got to Green Bay, to realize yes, that's part of the dream, is playing at Green Bay, being successful, but it's a journey. And that's kind of when I had to hone in on my mental side of things, because I got so caught up with, I redshirted my freshman year. I played 0 minutes that year. The next year I averaged 5 minutes a game, so it was not what you had built it up to be. I wasn't playing. I'm there, but I'm not playing. So now what? And that's when I really had to focus in on myself and realize that the ability to play doesn't have the effects on who you are as a person. And that's when I really had to self-reflect.
And on that journey, when did you, Laken, become passionate about mental health, particularly for young girls and women?
My sophomore year, so it would have been my third year at Green Bay. Summer before, I did everything possible to be successful on the basketball court. Like I mentioned before, all the things that mattered, right? So I had changed my nutrition. I was doing extra speed stuff with my strength coach. I was shooting, 400 shots a day, making 400 shots a day. And I really focused on all that. And when the season came, I did earn a starting spot. So it was a huge stepping stone in my career. It showed that, all that work paid off. But what ended up happening is I was about 7 games in to that season and I lost my starting spot because I wasn't mentally prepared for that pressure or, the self-inflicted pressure. So I had to now navigate dedicating my whole summer, my whole, at that point, life, earning that starting spot and then losing that starting spot. So that next summer, I really changed my mindset. I did all of the same stuff. I focused on my nutrition. I was still a Division I athlete, but I really stepped aside and I was like, there's more to this. And that's kind of when I realized that I needed to be training mentally. I needed to do breath work. I needed to, I was reading books on, confidence and calmness and just all of those things to kind of help with maybe the anxiety that I felt with that pressure. And I think that for me was my moment of really realizing how important this was for myself, and then not understanding why we didn't have things like this in place for these athletes.
Could you unpack what that looked like for you? What did those mental hurdles look like for listeners who may not have identified the mental challenges that they are having? What can that look like?
For me, it was basketball had always been my strongest passion. When I was having a bad day, I wanted to go to the gym. That's where I decompressed. And now that space that brought me so much peace my whole life was now bringing me this anxiety or pressure or sadness. I think all of those words define what that looked like for me during those times. And I would go to practice, and no matter how hard I tried, I would say, today's going to be a good day, whatever. The first shot I missed, I'd crumble mentally, so it was a different place than I've ever been in my entire career. And, obviously where I'm at now, I still say strongly that basketball is my strongest passion. I absolutely love it. But during those couple months, those years, it was really hard for me.
And then you eventually founded 5-Star Academy, an incredible organization that impacts so many young ladies today. Tell us about the mission of your academy.
Honestly, the mission for me is I want to, one, bring in that mental training side, but also I want to have young women feel empowered to inspire the next young women. And I think that's the biggest part of what we want to be able to do, is because I can inspire and communicate and work with so many athletes, but I want other females to be doing the same thing. And that's our mission is, what we say is we want role models to create role models. And that's kind of what we pride ourselves in, that mission.
Role models, creating role models, women supporting and empowering women. That's beautiful, so powerful, and so very much needed. And especially in a space like sports. I mean, the NCAA, they surveyed about 9,800 athletes. And what they discovered was that 22% of young men, they reported feeling mentally exhausted often. But 38% of young women reported feeling the same. So when you hear that, what strategies or tools does 5-Star Academy employ to help girls and women maintain or discover mental wellness?
Yeah, so what we have is, we call it a STARS curriculum. So what we like to do is we like to break down the different aspects of, you could call it mental training, but it's like setting goals. So it's an acronym. So it's setting goals, it's teamwork, it's adversity. You have role models. So that's just kind of different topics that might be, a part of the world today that we live in, social media, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last S is that self-confidence piece. So we have different lessons in all of our different pieces of the curriculum, and hopefully just creating conversations. I was working with an athlete one time, and we had a FaceTime meeting, and we chatted. And one of her questions to me was, I played on JV last year at the high school level. This year I'm on varsity. There's so many fans. And it was like such an eye-opening experience for me, because I was like, these kids need to learn about this. Like,
Yes.
we need to have this conversation. Like, yes, your students will now be in the stands when you go to that varsity level. And it was so cute. But like, at the same time, like, those are the conversations we need to be having. How do you handle that anxiety? How do you handle the heckling fan, for the first time? And
wow.
It was cool. One of my athletes specifically, she was really struggling. She was the sixth person. So she was six woman on the bench. And she was really struggling with that, because she mentally felt and physically felt that she should be in that starting lineup. And, the message that we share a lot of times is just control what you can control, because the problem was with playing time, which again comes back to her coach. And that happens all the time in sports, right? So what we had to do, we had to work through, again, setting different goals. We're going to get up, we're going to do speed and strength in the morning, so maybe you plan those kind of things. We're going to get extra shots up. And you wanted her to feel successful in those different aspects of that journey. And at the same time, she was getting better because of those things. So instead of, maybe feeling down or moping about it, we gave opportunities for her to work through that adversity. And it didn't necessarily mean that it was always, sunshine and roses, but it was just a chance for her to realize, like, this is out of my control, but I'm going to get better today. What we talk about all the times, like we say, refs, you cannot control the refs
man.
as much as you want to. So your body language after that call, that's a controllable. That's something you can control. But playing time, that's a big one. Sometimes the scenario of how much we can practice in a gym. Maybe we don't always have access to a gym, but something you could control is going in your driveway, dribbling the basketball, doing speed stuff. You can do that on your own. And I think that when you look at always the uncontrollable, you can always find something that is controllable. And that's what we like. So counter it, one way or another with things that we can control.
No, that's an awesome approach. And you recently took to social media sharing an alarming stat. You shared a study showing that mental health disorders impacted younger athletes at a much higher rate than older athletes. What would you say contributes to this, and what is a probable solution?
Being obviously at one point a younger athlete myself, I would say that maybe when we're younger, we don't take it as serious, or our surroundings don't take the sport and the pressures as serious as maybe they do at the professional level. But I promise you that there's still athletes and kids that take it as serious, and therefore they have the anxieties, they have the pressures, and yet we don't have anything to necessarily help them in place currently, all the time, I should say. And then I guess to toot their own horn, but like things like 5-Star Academy, but those are the conversations we need to be having with young athletes. It's not necessarily what we have in place now, it's what we can have in place in the future to help them.
And so many things are going unsaid. There's just not always time to have those conversations in more of a team setting. And for me personally, the mental challenges I face as a college athlete, also as a professional athlete, number one was anxiety. Yep. And so to hear that you're creating space like that for so many young athletes is absolutely beautiful. And we can't talk about the youth, we can't talk about adolescence without speaking to social media. I mean, that's so much of the world nowadays. And so many, their social engagements, their expectations, the interactions they have, they start and end on social media. And so for the people listening to this call that understand the impact that it's having on our youth today, what can we as parents, as mentors, as coaches, what can we do to better prepare our students, our athletes, our children for the challenges that they'll come with and that they'll need to expect on social media?
Yeah, I think, stepping aside from social media, the very first barrier that you can put up is just creating self-confidence, because sometimes we can't always monitor what is on that social media platform. But if we feel good about ourselves, those things don't affect us in the same exact ways. And that's just a inner approach. As far as, managing a social media, I would say that the best tool or a piece of advice I personally would give is just make sure that if and when you're using that social media platform, it brings you knowledge or joy. If it doesn't bring you those two things, click on follow, block, delete, whatever. But social media shouldn't bring that anxiety or that negativity. I think it's a great tool. I love my Twitter feed because I'm inspired every time I open it, because of the people I follow and the things that they're doing, and it motivates me. But I think that if those tools and those social media platforms and apps aren't bringing those things, we're using it wrong, and we got to help our kids and the youth kind of realize that.
It's just protecting that mental space, because everything that we listen to, everything that we read, everything that we watch, our mind subconsciously takes a picture, it records it, it keeps it, and it affects us subconsciously in one way or another. It affects how we think. It affects how we see ourselves. It affects how we treat others as well. And so that's a great conversation to have. And then also recognizing, Laken, that even the best athletes and coaches have issues with their confidence or their mental state. I even think about Naomi Osaka, 4-time Grand Slam winner, who had to step away from the sport for months at what many would say was the peak of her career, right? And she said she felt ashamed. She felt ashamed for her mental break because as an athlete, she was always told to tough it out. My question to you, Laken, is when do you tough it out and when is it safe to hit pause or even stop to protect your mental space and tend to your mental health?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's kind of almost unanswerable because I think each person is so different. For myself personally, when I went through my college experience, when I was feeling that anxiety and I was feeling all of those pressures, never did I think it would help to step away. And that was a personal experience because, again, I needed to work on my mental strength. I needed to work on those things. But at the same time, it was all because I had a strong desire to get to that next level. So it was more so of like, that was something I needed to grit through. But I think that there's plenty of examples of athletes that might need to step away to find themselves, to breathe, and just to recreate that self-worth and that confidence. And I think that there's probably plenty of athletes that have experienced that and feel so much better on the other side after the break.
What does it look like to intentionally tend to your mental health? Because I know it's more than just time. Because time can pass and you can reapproach that situation and you could still have the same effects. But what does being intentional about your mental health look like?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think a lot of times when we have mental health, maybe we cope with incorrect things, whether that be alcohol, substance, poor nutrition. So I think that they kind of go side by side in the sense of if we step away to work on our mental health, I think we also need to maybe focus maybe a little bit more on our other health as well. Let's make sure we're eating clean. Let's make sure we're drinking water. We're getting plenty of sleep at night. All of that self-care stuff. Let's hang out with our friends and family. If you're taking that time to step away, we can't just assume that if I step away and I'm eating fast food every single night and I'm doing other things that might feel better in the moment, we're not going to come up on that other side feeling better about ourselves. So they kind of do go side by side, in my opinion, in that way of working on our self-care and, building that confidence.
I know something that helps me tremendously. It just roots me and gets my feet back on the ground is being around my family and having that time or just totally disconnecting. And so things don't feel so heavy or overwhelming and reapproaching that situation, it sometimes it helps you feel better. At least for me. What is something that you do specifically when you deal with those challenges still as the high achiever that you are?
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of times when my mental health is off, my social meter is also really high. So for me, I like to go to nature, have quiet time, maybe read a book, but just reboot in that setting of just quietness. And for me personally, that's a huge one. But again, everyone's can be different. But I like to really get a fresh battery. So I think a lot of times when my mental health is haywire, I'm dealing with that. I think coming down and just having that time with just myself, my thoughts, and just refresh.
So necessary, so necessary, especially in the world where basketball is more year-round than it ever has been with AAU and all of that. Well, we're going to pivot just a little bit. Since Title IX became law 50 years ago, women have played sports mostly within systems that have been created by or created for men. Like, let's be real. Only now are researchers beginning to identify and take into consideration that women, psychologically, they're just different and that affects their performance. How can less intentional coaching impact female athletes?
That's a great question. And that's all a fantastic topic that I'm extremely passionate about. I just truly believe, we need to notice the differences between males and females. And I think a lot of times our research is so underrepresented on the female side when we're talking about the mental space. And I think that our young women are often given tools and theories and methods that have been tested solely on males. And to your point, That's not going to necessarily benefit these young women. We might need something different for our confidence than a male does, or we might need something different for anxiety tactics than a male does. And I think in order to really boost that, that's where that research needs to come in. And we need to, A, acknowledge that they're different, and then B, think of the tools and the methods that would better help our young females.
So how can coaches properly lead and protect those in their care that face these mental hurdles?
Yeah, I think that it's going to take some legwork on the coach's side, because you're going to have to really look at the research and figure out how we can best help our young female athletes. And that's just part of the role that they're going to be asked to step into. And I think a lot of times our young women, it's that confidence piece. So how can we help them build confidence, help them feel empowered, help them get to that next step of their journey, whatever that looks like? Some it might be the next level of basketball. Some it might be, I want to go to get a 4-year degree. I want to do this. But that all stems from that confidence. So I think as a coach, the biggest role and piece of advice and work that we can do with our athletes is going to be that piece of confidence.
And earlier in this conversation, you spoke on how you made major jumps in your career and how it was directly connected and related to just prioritizing your mental health and your mental training. We watched track star Sha'carri Richardson, right, recently in the press. And she has made a huge jump just within the last year in her performance on the track. She recently recorded one of the fastest times this year for the 100-meter dash, qualifying for the 2023 World Games. And things have not been going so well for her up until recently. And after she had this phenomenal performance, she was quoted saying, "I'm not back, I'm better." And mentally, she shared that she was unhealthy and that she had some work to do. And so for the most part, she kind of removed herself from social media. And I imagine that's where the intentional work took place. And so hearing her say those words, "I'm back and I'm better," that was revelational. That's something I want for all the young ladies that are listening to this call, just understanding how hitting pause or hitting stop can really, really help you make strides in your performance. And it's so important for us as coaches to also recognize that as well. And not just coaches, for the parents, for the family members, for the friends who are listening in. How do we empower and encourage female athletes to prioritize their mental health and well-being throughout their sporting careers and even beyond, Laken?
I think we have to, open that conversation in that mindset of when you do have to take time away, you follow those exact words. You can come back better. And I think that's going to be a huge piece of encouraging and normalizing when that needs to happen. Because sometimes if you're just dragging along because you feel like you have to, if you took that break, you can come back better. And it's that encouraging piece for those young athletes to really realize you step away, you're going to be better, you're going to be stronger, you're going to be more mentally fit, you're going to be more ready to go.
So this is the point in the show where we go to rapid fire questions.
I'm ready.
All right. Favorite country outside of the U.S.?
Italy.
A must visit in Oconto, Wisconsin.
The coffee shop on Main.
Offense or defense?
Defense.
Who is the GOAT, your all-time favorite and best female athlete? No pressure, but a lot of pressure.
Sue Bird.
Finish this statement. If you really knew me, you would know
that I'm extremely passionate.
What's one thing you want to say to the young girls back in Oconto, Wisconsin?
I would say dream bigger.
Wow. Very, very well said. Laken, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the About Time podcast. This conversation has been very much insightful in so many ways.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
I'm Vanessa Fuchs, WeCOACH CEO. I wanted to quickly highlight for you 2 upcoming programs that are critical for advancing our mission. The first is December 11th. We'll debut our new We Elevate Women Coaches, a program dedicated to intentionally preparing assistant coaches for head coaching roles. And the second, we'll be opening applications later this month for our premier WeCOACH NCAA Women Coaches Academy and Academy 2.0. Those programs will be hosted in Denver, Colorado, June 16th through the 19th in 2024. Mark your calendars, save the dates. If you'd like to learn more about WeCOACH programs, please visit our website, wecoachsports.org. And on behalf of our partners at Hudl and Team WeCOACH, we wish you a wonderful holiday season.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear more episodes like this, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and to our YouTube channel. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.